People, welcome back. The one I may talk about 3 people, or it's possible 1. Cause them stories timeline kind of overlap. So it's like we're not sure if it's not the same person, cause everything just dwindle down with them disappear in the same period of time, where them stories just phase away, especially at a time when things just wasn't how it's supposed to be. Racism did exist, blatant. Black man couldn't invent anything. At them time, the slavery is at its heights. Well, slavery abolished, but it's still not going on in its bits. Wars are going over it to continue and all of that. Now the 3 people we're talking about today. Thomas Jennings, John Edmunstone, and the Jamaican version, Bogle. Now people, make we listen to them different stories as to how the main stories go way out there, go upon them. But we can find other information or other research. I may have another video upon the Paul Bogle thing and William Garden thing, where may I do bring to you later on. But anyway, make we listen to what go on with this. And Uno tell me at the end of it, we don't think if I'm the same person, because I think Paul Bogle could be about 65 when them end up executing instead of 43 or 33. So make we listen, people.
Thomas Jennings, 1791 to 1856, was most likely the first African-American patentee. The patent was granted on the 3rd of March, 1821 for a cleaning process called dry scouring. He was able to patent his invention because he was a freed man. The patent law at that time would otherwise prohibit granting patents to slaves who were viewed as the property of their master. The first money Thomas Jennings earned from his patent was spent on liberating his family out of slavery and to support the abolitionist cause. In 1821, an African-American business owner named Thomas Jennings invented the dry cleaning process and was one of the first African-Americans to be granted a patent. He used the proceeds from his invention to buy his wife and children out of slavery. The current picture is also not of Thomas Jennings, it is of Garrett Morgan, inventor of the gas mask / smoke hood and some hair care products, who was born more than 20 years after Jennings died. Thomas Jennings, 1791 February 12, 1856, a freeborn African-American and New Yorker who became a leader of the abolitionist movement, made his fortune as the inventor of a dry cleaning process called dry scouring. Jennings was 30 years old when he received his patent on the 3rd of March, 1821, U.S. Patent 3306X, becoming the first African-American inventor to own the rights to his invention. Jennings was born in 1791 in New York City. He started his career as a tailor and eventually opened one of New York's leading clothing shops. Inspired by frequent requests for cleaning advice, he began researching cleaning solutions. Jennings found that many of his customers were unhappy when their clothing became soiled. However, because of the material used to make the garments, conventional methods at the time were ineffective in cleaning them. Jennings began experimenting with different solutions and cleaning agents. He tested them on various fabrics until he found the right combination to treat and clean them. He called his method dry scouring, a process now known as dry cleaning. Jennings filed for a patent in 1820 and was granted a patent for the dry scouring, dry cleaning, process he had invented just a year later. Tragically, the original patent was lost in a fire. But by then, Jennings' process of using solvents to clean clothes was well known and widely heralded. Jennings spent the first money he earned from his patent on legal fees to buy his family out of enslavement. After that, most of his income went to his abolitionist activities. In 1831, Jennings became Assistant Secretary for the first annual Convention of the People of Color in Philadelphia. Luckily for Jennings, he filed his patent at the right time. Under the United States patent laws of 1793 and 1836, both enslaved and free citizens could patent their inventions. However, in 1857, an enslaver named Oscar Stewart patented a double cotton scraper that was invented by one of the enslaved people forced to work for him. Historical records only show the real inventor's name as being Ned. Stewart's reasoning for his action was that the master is the owner of the fruits of the labor of the slave, both manual and intellectual. In 1858, the U.S. Patent Office changed its patent regulations in response to a Supreme Court case related to Stewart's patent called Oscar Stewart v. Ned. The court ruled in favor of Stewart, noting that enslaved people were not citizens and could not be granted patents. But surprisingly, in 1861, the Confederate States of America passed a law granting patent rights to enslaved people. In 1870, the U.S. government passed a patent law giving all American men, including black Americans, the rights to their inventions. Jennings' daughter, Elizabeth, an activist like her father, was the plaintiff in a landmark lawsuit after being thrown off a New York City streetcar while on the way to church. With support from her father, Elizabeth sued the Third Avenue Railroad Company for discrimination and won her case in 1855. The day after the verdict, the company ordered its cars disgregated. After the incident, Jennings organized a movement against racial segregation in public transit in the city. The services were provided by private companies. The same year, Jennings was one of the founders of the Legal Rights Association, a group that organized challenges to discrimination and segregation and gained legal representation to take cases to court. Jennings died just a few years later in 1859, which was itself just a few years before the practice he so reviled, enslavement, was abolished. A decade after Elizabeth Jennings won her case, all New York City streetcar companies stopped practicing segregation. Jennings and his daughter had a hand in the effort to desegregate public facilities, a movement that lasted well into the civil rights era a century later. Indeed, civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s 1963 I Have a Dream speech in Washington, D.C., echoed many of the convictions that Jennings and his daughter had expressed and fought for 100 years before. And the dry scouring process Jennings invented is essentially the same method used by dry cleaning businesses worldwide to this day. Many black people's contributions to science are hidden from history, and we have to reconstruct their stories from the margins of more famous naturalists' lives. One such intriguing figure is John Edmunstone. A former enslaved black man from Guyana, John was living in Edinburgh when he met a young Charles Darwin and taught him the skill of taxidermy. This was fundamental to Darwin's ability to preserve the specimens he collected during his 5-year voyage on HMS Beagle. Though we only have scant details on Edmunstone's life, what we know reveals that he was a talented and respected taxidermist and naturalist. Edmunstone in Guyana. John Edmunstone was born into slavery in Guyana, South America, in 1790. He was enslaved on a timber plantation in Demerara, owned by Scotsman Charles Edmunstone, hence John's surname. His birth name remains unknown. The eccentric naturalist Charles Waterton, whose family also enslaved people, visited Charles Edmunstone's plantation a number of times on his travels through Guyana. Waterton had developed new methods to preserve bird skins, using toxic mercuric chloride as a fast-acting fixative to stop the animal's tissues decaying. He taught these techniques to John, who accompanied him on some collecting expeditions. Despite Waterton believing that John had poor abilities, and it required much time and patience to drive anything into him, Darwin's later recollections of John's skill seems to contradict this assessment. Edmunstone in Scotland. Plantation owner Charles Edmunstone returned to Scotland in 1817 and John came with him. Although we don't know if John was already free when he arrived, he would have become a free man on entering Scotland. Owning slaves was banned in Scotland in 1778 following the case of James Knight. At first, John lived in Glasgow. By 1824 he was in Edinburgh, making a living for himself working for the University of Edinburgh's Zoological Museum and living at 37 Lothian Street. Edmunstone and Darwin. Darwin went to Edinburgh in 1825 when he was 16 to study medicine, but he didn't really enjoy the subject and only stayed for 2 years. While there, he did grow his interest in natural history, attending talks and undertaking his own investigations. Darwin's lodgings were at 11 Lothian Street near Edmunstone's. Darwin hired Edmunstone to give him private lessons. Though in a letter to his sister it seems price was the main initial motivator. "I am going to learn to stuff birds, from a blackamoor, I believe, an old servant of Dr. Duncan. It has the recommendation of cheapness, if it has nothing else." Darwin later mentioned in his autobiography. A Negro lived in Edinburgh, who had travelled with Waterton, and gained his livelihood by stuffing birds, which he did excellently. He gave me lessons for payment, and I used often to sit with him, for he was a very pleasant and intelligent man. Edmunstone charged Darwin 1 guinea for an hour every day for 2 months. As well as the time spent on instruction, the two must have conversed on the natural history Edmunstone knew first-hand from South America. Darwin's preserved bird specimens. Thanks to Edmunstone's teachings, Darwin's preservation skills were put to great use during his voyage on HMS Beagle, from 1831 to 1836. Of the many specimens Darwin collected, almost 500 were bird skins. Perhaps the most scientifically evocative of the skins are the mockingbirds collected in the Galapagos Islands. It was the Galapagos mockingbirds, rather than the better-known finches, that helped precipitate Darwin's thoughts on evolution. We can't be sure that Darwin himself prepared all the bird skins, since specimen preparation was something that was carried out collectively on the Beagle. However, the skills that Darwin learned from Edmunstone would have been passed down to his assistants. A life in the margins. There are scant details of Edmunstone's later life. We know he was still living in Edinburgh in 1833 and had moved to 6 South St. David Street. However, it is not currently known where he was laid to rest after his death. We can only speculate as to the effect his story had on the young Darwin. His accounts of South America must certainly have been inspiring to Darwin. Did Edmunstone help form Darwin's abolitionist viewpoint? We know from his journals from the Beagle that Darwin noticed cruel acts during the voyage which he found repugnant. In 2009, a plaque was unveiled in his memory on Lothian Street, although it has since disappeared. But awareness of Edmunstone has grown in recent years, and we can hope that his story, and that of other black people contributing to the study of natural history, continues to be told. Paul Bogle, 1822 – the 24th of October, 1865, too, was a Jamaican Baptist deacon and activist. He is a national hero of Jamaica. He was a leader of the 1865 Morant Bay protesters, who marched for justice and fair treatment for all the people in Jamaica. After leading the Morant Bay Rebellion, Bogle was captured, tried and convicted by the colonial government, who had declared martial law, and hanged on the 24th of October, 1865 in the Morant Bay Courthouse. 3. Bogle had become a friend of a wealthy landowner and fellow Baptist George William Gordon, a biracial man who served in the assembly as one of 2 representatives from Street Thomas in the East Parish. Gordon was instrumental in Bogle being appointed deacon of Stony Gut Baptist Church in 1864. Conditions were hard for black peasants, due to social discrimination, flooding and crop failure, and epidemics. The required payment of poll taxes prevented most of them from voting. In August 1865, Gordon criticized the governor of Jamaica, Edward John Eyre, for sanctioning everything done by the higher class to the oppression of the Negroes. 4. Bogle concentrated on improving the conditions of the poor. 5. As awareness of social injustices and people's grievances grew, Bogle led a group of small farmers 45 miles to the capital, Spanish Town, hoping to meet with Governor Eyre to discuss their issues, but they were denied an audience. 6. The people of Stony Gut lost confidence and trust in the government, and Bogle's supporters grew in number in the parish. Morant Bay Rebellion. On the 7th of October, 1865, Bogle and some supporters attended a trial of 2 men from Stony Gut. One was convicted and sentenced to prison on charges of trespassing on a long-abandoned plantation. A member of Bogle's group protested in court over the case, but was immediately arrested, angering the crowd further. He was rescued moments later when Bogle and his men took to the market square and retaliated. The police were severely beaten and forced to retreat. 7. On Monday, the 9th of October, 1865, warrants were issued against Bogle and a number of others for riot and assault. The police arrived in Stony Gut to arrest Bogle but met with stiff resistance from the residents. They fought the police, forcing them to retreat to Morant Bay. A few days later, on the 11th of October, 1865, there was a vestry meeting in the courthouse. That day Bogle led hundreds of followers, armed with sticks and machetes, on a protest march to the courthouse. The authorities had mustered a volunteer militia, who fired into the protesters after stones were thrown, killing 7 men. The protesters set fire to the courthouse and nearby buildings. When officials tried to leave, several were killed by the angry mob outside. A total of 25 on both sides died that day. 6. Black peasants rose and took control of the parish for 2 days. The governor quickly retaliated, declaring martial law and ordering troops to capture the rebels and suppress the rebellion. The troops destroyed Stony Gut and Bogle's chapel, killing more than 400 persons outright across the parish, including women and children. They arrested more than 300 persons, including Bogle. Jamaican Maroons from Moortown eventually captured Bogle and delivered him to the colonial government. 8. He was tried under martial law and quickly executed, as were many others. 2. 4 others, including women and children, were brought back to Morant Bay to be tried under martial law. 6. Gordon was convicted of conspiracy and hanged on 23 October, 6, and Bogle was hanged the following day. Back in Britain there was public outcry, and increased opposition from liberals against Eyre's handling of the situation, with accusations against him of murder. Supporters praised the governor for acting quickly in the crisis to suppress a potentially larger rebellion. 9. Aftermath. By the end of 1865 the Governor Eyre case had become the subject of widespread national debate. In January 1866, a royal commission was sent to investigate the events. Governor Eyre was suspended and recalled to England and eventually dismissed. The national government changed that of Jamaica. The House of Assembly resigned its charter, and Jamaica was made a crown colony, governed directly by Britain. 9. The Eyre controversy turned into a long and increasingly public issue, dividing well-known figures of the day. It may have contributed to the fall of the government. In 1866 John Stuart Mill set up and chaired the Jamaica Committee to examine the atrocities committed in Jamaica in the course of ending the rebellion. 10. Thomas Carlyle set up a rival committee to defend Eyre. His supporters included John Ruskin, Charles Kingsley, Charles Dickens and Alfred, Lord Tennyson. 11. The Morant Bay Rebellion turned out to be one of the defining points in Jamaica's struggle for both political and economical enhancement. Bogle's demonstration ultimately achieved its objectives and paved the way for new attitudes.
Now people, after listening to all of that, we can come me form an opinion based on the facts here. We can't find nothing about Bogle before the 1860s. And we are fine about the other 2 people through late 1790s through the early 18s. And we are fine one disappear. We're not hear nothing more about him from 1833. The next one, him appear back. Could from 1933 him go back to America and buy back him family out of slavery. And then him go to Jamaica. goes as this. Whatever age them same is. Cause maybe a them all a make up him age, a give him age. Cause they not no birth date for him. So him possibly could be 65 instead of 43 like them I said. People, don't tell me what to think on it, cause the man educated enough. Him there was Edinburgh work at theological museum. So for him come back at Jamaica be a pastor. The coincidence come away. And all of this too go on a period of time where at just now the same time Jamaica a change a become a colony. Right now the same period Paul Bogle time. So it's like we look upon it as one of the reasons why they give Bogle and Garden era shit, because them did a look and try to get back the British to come rule over them unruly people and what they may have in the place and do savagery. Yes, it ended up happen, but them lose the country through it. People, based on what you hear, tell me what you think in the comment section. Peace out. Thanks for watching and listening.